Hey guys, I have a question for you. How do you spread abundance? This year, Joe and I are spreading even more abundance by giving out insights on money, wealth strategies, and resources in our current newsletter, Creating Abundance in 52 Weeks, that we want to share with you for free. So sign up right now as you're listening to this episode on our website at www.abundantculture.co. That's .co/newsletter. www.abundantculture.co/newsletter. Don't let delay get in the way of your abundant year. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast,
where we dissect the mindsets and tactics of the true beasts of business.
People like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and Warren Buffett.
All to create a blueprint to experience life more abundantly. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast. It's your co-host, Joseph, and today we're interviewing somebody who is very, very near and dear to my heart. Been a good friend for a couple years now, and honestly, this episode was supposed to happen like a year ago, but because of misunderstandings, it had to wait a little while.
Well, not misunderstandings, because it makes it seem like we have beef, and we don't.
No, not between me and you, between
right.
you and somebody else.
Sure, yeah.
He was going through some things. But it was supposed to happen a while ago, and it finally did. This is the guy who got me started. I could say got me started in real estate, but honestly, that would be an understatement. He got me started in
Steve.
Building wealth. I hate you.
That wasn't me. That was Steve.
He got me started in building wealth. This was the guy who taught me most of what I know about real estate investing, and also taught me the important skill of sales, marketing, raising capital, things that I still use today. So get ready to listen to and learn from our good friend, Daniel Kwak.
That's right.
How's it going, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I just got over a cold, and it wasn't the C word.
It wasn't the C word.
I learned that you can't say that on YouTube because they'll demonetize you.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. Like
so I gotta edit. No, I don't have to edit it.
Right. We haven't said anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, C word usually means something else, but like this time the C it's more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm doing good.
Excellent.
Good. So before we get into all the content, the real estate business, all that stuff, we have to ask you, for our listeners' sake, because we already know the story, but what is your story? How did you get into business?
Yeah.
And don't spare the gritty details, because I know you, and I'll call you out for.
Yeah. So my story, So, I immigrated to this country, United States, for, I don't know if you guys have foreign listeners. I'm sure you guys do.
We do.
Yes.
That's all right. Mm-hmm. So I immigrated to the United States when I was 5 with my brother and then my parents, and then my dad is a pastor. And so we immigrated to Chicago, and it's like I consider this my hometown now. But we came here, obviously the typical immigrant story, like no money, we were sleeping in cars because we couldn't pay the heating bill, and, liked going to school because I got a free meal, and, just didn't speak a lick of English, right? So I think like the first words I learned in English was thank you. So I remember like even in kindergarten, like my teacher would ask me like, hey, like what's 2 + 2? And I'd be like, thank you. Like, do you need to use the bathroom? I'd be like, thank you. So it was like the most stereotypical Asian thing like you can imagine. So that was like the life, and then I always had a question growing up. It's just like why are some people poor and some people rich? And I used to secretly like resent rich people, and I think a lot of people do today. Like I was like, why? You know what I mean? Like my parents worked their butt off, and then we were still not able to afford a whole lot of things. But at the same time, when you're a kid, like that's just life. You just accept it. There is no, rich or poor, I guess. But it was just more so, why do other kids get to like go to McDonald's every day and go to Disney World, where like going to McDonald's for us was like a vacation. You know what I mean? And we split like the dollar menu, like split it in 4 pieces, and But that was my life growing up. And then fast forward to 17, I read this article by Forbes that the richest people in the world invest in real estate. So I'm like, oh man. And I've always been a huge Bulls fan. And the guy who owns the Bulls now, who eventually will sell it to me, he made his money. I read his biography, and I was like, what did he do? Like, how did he make his money? Because he's a self-made billionaire. And it's this guy who started out as a real estate CPA, an attorney. And we have a lot of friends that do real estate CPA and attorneying. And then he started investing in commercial real estate when he was like 28 years old. So I was like, oh man, like I know what I got to do. But it's always kind of in like the back of my mind. I was like, like I'll get to it when I get older. And then when I was like 18, 19, I had like negative $187 in my bank account. And I was like, all right, like, well, like so I got to do something. So, I'm a believer, as you guys are, right? So I sat down and I asked God, it's like, hey, you got to do something. You got to send me someone or whatever. And then 3 months later, I found my first mentor, along with the organization that, that's how we met. And then I just spent, my brother and I both, we spent just a buttload of cash just buying real estate programs. And it wasn't cash. Like we called the credit card companies and asked them to like increase our line. We did whatever we could, scrapped money. I used to do music every single weekend for churches, and that's how like I made the little money I had. So that's how I necessarily got started. That's kind of my story, the short version, leading up to how I even got involved with business.
Absolutely. So you touched on a couple key points there. One of them specifically that I kind of want to zoom in on is that idea of you basically borrowing cash in order to invest in your own education. Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I feel like some people, they're like, oh, when I have the money, I'll, invest it in myself. But the problem is sometimes is that people never have the money.
Yeah.
So like, what would be, I guess, your advice to somebody who knows that they need to further their education in order to get further, but are kind of lacking some of the resources in order to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like Tony Robbins says all the time, like the greatest resource is resourcefulness. I always tell people, listen, like you have to pay for education, but it doesn't have to be with money. Like one of the things that I wish I would have done when I was 18, 19 years old is I wish I would have gone to some successful real estate investors. I wish I would have told them, hey, like I'll work for you for free. Now granted, like I'm sure the quality of my work wouldn't be that great, and they probably would have had me do something like, oh, well, you can clean my office, and in exchange, you can shadow me for a day. Like I'm necessarily not gonna I'm not gonna be pitching deals for them. They don't want me doing that or analyzing the markets or whatever. Yeah. Because that's what a lot of people have in mind when it's just like, oh, like I get emails and texts all the time. It's like, hey, like, can I work for you for free? And in exchange, and I'm like, I always reply like, well, what do you envision yourself doing? And it's crazy how like entitled some people are nowadays, because they're like, well, here's what I can do for you. Like I can negotiate deals for you. I'm like, no, like I don't want you doing that because I think I do a better job. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden when I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, like if you want to come to a free meetup I host on Tuesday night, or if you want, you could just follow me around. Like you can be my assistant. And granted, like you're not going to be doing the sexiest stuff. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be out there, shaking hands with investors who have millions of dollars. It's probably going to be more along the lines of, hey, like, can you make 5 copies of this? And can you do that? But, people aren't willing to do that, So, whether it's paying with money, which I did, which I don't regret, by the way, like I've never regretted buying real estate investing education or education in general. But at the same time, like you can do that and you could, use your other currency, which is time. And you could use time to pay for education. But a lot of it is just the mindset. Yeah. Like people aren't willing to do that, and they don't have a money mindset. I mean, these guys, they just don't know how to, like they can't even draw money if they had green crayon and a white sheet of paper. Like it's just so sad. Some of these kids, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, in all honesty, like there is like education costs something. I always say you either pay for it here or you pay for it out there in the market, and the cost of paying for it in the market is a lot more expensive.
A lot higher.
A lot higher. Yeah.
So we know that you are a very, very hard worker. I mean, you used to host these meetups, and we'd be there from like 9 to or 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Were you always that hard of a worker? Like, did you always have like that drive and ambition that you had, or did that start once you found your mentor and got that momentum going?
Yeah, I think I kind of fell into the trap. Like, a lot of people are like, well, you got to be working 18 hours a day. Like, you know what I mean? Like Gary Vee, right? And all these like Grant Cardone guys, like you got to 10X it, right? Like, you have all these guys that say like, oh, you got to work 14, 16, 18 hours a day. And maybe for some people that works. But for me, I always tell people, like, find your pace. Like, your pace is so much more important. Like, find your optimal schedule and don't BS yourself. Like, just be honest. Like, because some people work 18 hours a day, but it's 18 hours of unproductive, just really poor quality work. Whereas if they worked 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day, they would get so much more productivity. And their work would have so much more quality. Or they will learn more, grow more. You know, so there's people where I tell them work 8 hours. There's people I work 18, you know, like just because you have like you're more efficient in that regard. But something that I've been learning a lot recently, because I used to be the guy that worked, you know, like 14, 18 hours. You know, I used to be in the office for hours on end. And I've been learning recently that for me, at least, that wasn't the most efficient thing to do. Because 18 hours meant, you know, what was I doing? Like, okay, I was researching, I was, you know, doing a lot of busy work, you know, and I realized I was calling myself successful because I was putting in 18 hours a day. That's not necessarily the case. I've been learning a lot, the power of delegation, the power of creating a system and working with it, and you know, working at a stronger pace, you know. And this is something that, like, the pace that I'm developing now is something that I'm going to enjoy when I'm 35, 45, you know, 60 years old. It's going to allow me to keep going and nonstop, you know, because at one point, like, I think it happened about 6 months ago to a year, like, I was working so much, like, I would stay up till 3 or 4 working, that at one point, like, I had trouble sleeping, and I started having health issues because, like, I was just not sleeping, period. Like, I think there was 1 week in particular that I'm thinking about where I think on average I got like 3 hours of sleep a night. Like, it was crazy. I would go to sleep at 5 and wake up at 8 or 9. And it got to the point where by Friday, like, I couldn't breathe. Like, I had legit trouble breathing, you know? And, like, it all crashed on Sunday. Like, I was supposed to be at church at 9 a.m. And I think I woke up at like 2, you know? And I got like 10 hours. And it just all crashed, you know? So, you know, my conversations with God and some of the people that mentor me, they were like, do you feel like you need to slow down? You know? So at this point, it's become a lot about how do I get far and not fast? Because you can't do both.
Oh yeah,
you know, like unless you build a team and you do that. But you know, even at that case, like when you do build a good team, like you go as far as, you know, the slowest member on your team. Yeah. You know, so and that's frustrating. You know what I mean? Because all three of us, I think, you know, and even my brother, who, you know, who's over there, like, I think we're all like, let's go, we got to go 1,000,000 miles per hour. Like, I want to be a billionaire like yesterday. You know, I think we're all there, but you know, it's tough, but that's the reality. You know, that's the reality of things that we have to face.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on there was really golden about being efficient with work instead of, you know, working for, you know, tons and tons of hours. The thing that I like to think of when I work is, am I working to be busy or am I working to provide value?
Yeah.
And I can always feel it almost in my spirit sometimes when I'm working to be busy. It's like I'm just exhausted.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. It could be like noon and I'm tired. But when I work to provide value, it's like I could have energy all day. So I think for our listeners, to kind of really put it in perspective for you, I think I met you kind of on the tail end of that. Yeah. I'm going to grind for like 16, 18 hours. And I saw that, and to see your transition now, like, dude, you're probably doing way more now.
Oh,
than
100%.
You were back then. And you probably don't work nearly as much. And that transition happened quickly. It feels like it was basically a year.
Yeah.
kind of. So.
Well, I mean, like we're living this day and age now where like everybody calls himself a grinder. You know, they're like, oh man, I'm on my grind, I'm on my hustle. And you know that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. Like you know, especially if you're starting out, like you should be on your grind. You know, you should be on the, you should be hustling.
Yeah.
But you know, I can say from experience, like there comes a time where like you have to go from your focus should be from working hard to working smart. You know, because think about who your competition is. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, business is a sport. You know, Mark Cuban says all the time, you know, like in basketball, you got 48 minutes. In football, you got 60 minutes. In business, it's 24/7, 365 every single year. And everyone's working to kick your butt. Yeah. You know, it's not just the people on the field. So when you're starting out, your competition, like, yeah, it's other people just starting out. And the person who wins is going to be the person who works hard. You know, but you get to a certain point where your competition's not the newbies anymore. Like you're not, you know, it's not like basketball. You know, you're not playing against high school kids anymore. You know, now you're playing at the NBA level. You're playing against other all-stars. So, you know, you're at the point where you got to now work smart.
Yeah.
You know, like we're at the age now where even just I'm gonna continue with the NBA example. Like the players who win rings, you know, championships are not the ones who work the hardest. You know, like they're not. They're the ones who are, number one, phenomenal leaders, you know, who know how to build a team together, you know, put a team together. And they're players who know how to play within a system. You know, I mean, even looking at all the past, even think about even like LeBron James. Like LeBron James is one of my favorite athletes. Not because he's like so talented, but because at the level he is, like no sex scandals, like phenomenal father, you know what I mean? Like he's just a phenomenal guy.
Absolutely.
But LeBron, like he didn't win his ring until he had teammates who could like keep up with him, you know? Like back when he had, you know, like nobody knows who, you know, Zorandas Zagauskas, you know what I mean? Like nobody knows these players, but until he teamed up with like Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and, you know, Ray Allen, you know, he didn't win his ring. And same thing in business. You know, it's the exact same thing in business. You know, playing smart, surrounding yourself with good people, and having a system where it works. You know, you're not going to create success.
Absolutely. And to kind of expand on that point of having the right team around you, how do you personally pick your team? Because I'm at a point now where I'm looking to build my team, and I'm actually finding out that there's some people on my team who probably shouldn't stay there.
Yeah.
And that's like
really, for sure. Yeah, they suck.
And I still feel like I'm new. So this is like culture shock to me.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, I thought I was gonna, you know, become a billionaire with this guy. And it's like, he's got to go like today, you know? So how do you personally like pick and choose who should be on your team? And not only who should be on your team, but if somebody's on your team, when it's time for them to maybe go to another team.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is, like, just because they're bad on your team, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. You know what I mean? Like, it just means they belong in another scenario. So, I mean, I've met a couple billionaires in my life, and I asked them, like, hey, what's the number one key to success? And every single one of them says, who you surround yourself with. That's the number one thing. You know, above ideas, above execution, above grind, like who you surround yourself is the number one important thing. And I remember watching this video. It was by a guy named Satya Nadella. He's the CEO of Google. Not Google, Microsoft. My bad. Sorry. But he's the CEO of Microsoft. And like somebody asked him a question. It's like, hey, what's the number one trait that you look for in a hire? Like when you hire somebody to be a part of Microsoft and be part of the Microsoft team, like what's the number one thing you look for? And I echo this because his words just kind of made tangible what I felt kind of this entire time with people, and I think what is the universal key to success. But I always ask myself in regards to that person, do they create clarity and do they create energy, right? And just those two things are the only things I care about. You know, do they bring clarity and do they bring energy, you know, in terms of the culture? And so I think, you know, it doesn't matter if like they have $1 million or they have $100,000. But if they can bring clarity and they can bring energy, you know, especially to like our team at the Kwak brothers, like that's so key. That's so key. Because like I'll tell you a story. Like we hired this one guy, this one sales dude. I won't mention his name, but he came in and he was a very charismatic sales guy. Like he knew how to talk to people.
Yeah.
He showed me sales numbers from a past job that he's worked, and he was like their number one sales dude, and he was really good. But little did I know, like he worked in a cubicle where he couldn't bother anyone. And so he came here, and here at the Kwak Brothers, our office, like it's very fraternal.
Yeah.
Like everybody talks to everybody. We're all best friends. Like me, Ricky, Joel, Mel, like we play basketball after like being in the office, and we just have fun. And even throughout the day, like we joke around, right? But this guy just took it way too far. Like he would literally he wouldn't even make calls. He would just constantly distract other people. And not only that, but he did the opposite of creating clarity. Like he would bring a lot of confusion and a lot of controversy.
Oh, wow.
Like I remember him and I got into it, and it wasn't an argument, just because I like conflict, and I see conflict as an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
But we had like a 4-hour discussion on like our marketing and how it needs to change. And so he was talking about all these changes that we needed to make, and yet he couldn't produce numbers. Like he wasn't making a sale, and he was very entitled. He was drawing inappropriate things on my whiteboard, and just like, it was just so dumb. Like it was a child. Like he was very much childish, So he was a phenomenal salesperson, but he did the opposite of bringing clarity, and just the opposite of bringing in good energy, in terms of what we needed. But on the other hand, I've hired people who are like complete introverts. They're not charismatic at all, but man, like they provide so much clarity, to whatever it is. And that's what I realized is like that's what the best entrepreneurs do. Best entrepreneurs and the best salespeople, like they bring clarity. They bring clarity, and they create good energy for people. So that's the number one thing I look for now in team members.
Amazing.
So does like prior experience matter then to you when you're hiring and looking for team members, or not?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends, because I think you get a little bit of both. It's pros and cons, right? Because if you got somebody who has a lot of prior experience, they may come in and want to do it their way, Now, if they have prior experience, they're good at what they do, but at the same time, they vibe with our mission, and they vibe with our vision and our company culture, then absolutely, come on in. Our mission statement at the Kwak Brothers is very simple. Like I think every mission statement should be simple. And for a lot of entrepreneurs that listen, whether it's this podcast or my YouTube channel, whatever it is, they forget the biggest thing, which is, their engine, which is their mission statement. What's their why? Why are they doing this? Our mission statement is very simple. It's literally transform people financially so they could truly live, right? And so they could do what God wants them to do. Because so many people, they have a vision, they have a mission for their life. And whether it's God-given or not, they have these things that they're passionate about, but, they're stuck in a job. They can't do it because they got to put food on the table for their family, which like people don't realize you could use it. That's a good question. Because on the other end, if you have somebody who has no experience and you could mold them and you could train them, they'll stay with you forever. So even the girl who works our cameras and does our editing, like she's 16 years old, and she's literally a teenager at my church. And she did my wedding, and I was really impressed with her work. Like, initially Lisa and I hired her for our wedding because, we know her, like, and she's going to do a good job, and she's got a good heart, and we want to help her out.
Yeah.
Man, like when I saw the work she did, I was like, it's better than some of the people that charge like $10,000, Like I know a ton of camera people and editors that charge like 5 figures for a marketing contract, and she like blew them out of the water. Like the quality was so much better, the audio was so much better. So, it's I guess experience isn't necessarily directly tied in with performance, but I hired her on the spot, and I'm paying her really well, because not only does she do a good job, and she has no prior experience, but it's somebody that we can grow and we can mold, and somebody I eventually want to make into a very very high role in our company.
Yeah. And also to kind of touch on that a little bit, how important is it to you that you uplift the people on your team? Because what you just said there, I don't know if a lot of entrepreneurs would notice it, but you have this mission, you have your own goals and ambitions that you want to fulfill, but at the same time, you mentioned that you want to make her into something that she isn't yet. How important is that to you? as a leader, a CEO, and a
Yeah.
founder?
So I always tell her, like I always tell people, for her, she's already that for me. Like she's already the VP of marketing in my mind, you know, because I always tell people that you can't get to a certain level and expect to be a superstar, you know. Like as weird as it's gonna be for me to bring him up. I love LeVar Ball. I love that guy. You know what I mean? And he says like you can't wait to be a superstar. Like you got to be a superstar when you're this little, you know. Like you can't all of a sudden, you know, be up there and start being a superstar, you know.
Yeah.
So for me, in my mind, she's already that person, you know. And my thing is just like if I have to motivate them, like then this isn't for you.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not. My job shouldn't be to motivate somebody. You know, like I get a lot of questions all the time. Like, well, how do you motivate your sales staff? It's like, well, number one, like have a system where they're incentivized to do well. Yeah. You know, but at the same time, like if you have to be the one to motivate them, then that's like I don't know. Maybe they belong somewhere else. You know, like Joel, he's our head sales guy right now. I mean, Joel's. I think he's only 20 years old.
Yeah.
But he's making 6 figures. Yeah. You know, doing sales. You know, and
he was not doing that before that.
No. He used to sell insurance, and you know, like I think on a good month he made like $7,000, which for him $7,000 today, like he's disappointed in himself. You know, like he's not happy with his performance. So you know, it's if I have to motivate them, then you gotta find better people. You know, but at the same time, like it is responsibility on our end as business owners to have a system where it's like, hey, like I want to do well.
Yeah.
So how are you mixing faith within your business and within the company culture and, you know, with all your partners and staff and everyone you're involved with?
Yeah, I don't at all. You know what I mean? I think when people say like, how do you mix in faith with this and this, that implies that those two things are completely separate. Mm-hmm. You know, and in my mind, they're completely mutual. Mm-hmm. Like I am Jesus to people. You know, it's not like how can I bring Jesus to them or like how could whatever, but it's literally like I am being Jesus to people. So you know, with our company, like we don't ever say like, oh, like you know, God bless it, like Jesus loves you, you know, whatever. We don't do that. We just show them love. You know, and Jesus never went around healing people. It's like, hey man, don't forget, God loves you. You know what I mean?
Got a concert next week.
Exactly. Yeah, right, exactly. You know what I mean? It's like Jesus never said like, hey man, like I want to invite you to my synagogue. You know, like next Saturday we're having a Easter egg hunt. You know what I mean? Like Jesus never said that. You know, instead Jesus just loved people. He healed them. He loved them. He was the kingdom of God to people, and he personified that. So for me, it's just, you know, I'd rather be Jesus to people than tell them about Jesus.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to somebody who maybe they're watching you on YouTube, or maybe they, you know, listen to my podcast or something along those lines, and they're thinking about real estate investing, I feel like everybody's journey is so different because, you know, you're one of my main mentors, and mine was like probably way different from yours. So just from your experience, what are some of the basic steps that you feel like everybody must fulfill in order to be a real estate investor?
Yeah, so first thing I'll say, like if you start investing in real estate for money purposes, you're probably not going to last very long.
Yep, that's why I sucked at it first.
Yeah, and my wife will tell you the same thing. Like my wife, I think, is more relatable to people just because, you know, she got her 4-unit, she owned it for a year and a half, now she's selling it. But she made no money the first year. Like she was negative $6,000 her first year, you know, in real estate. Mm-hmm. It's not really until like you build a successful system and you have a platform where it's like manageable, and all your buildings are like sustained is when you start like really making money. But in terms of what steps somebody should take when they first start, I mean, I think the first thing is figure out whether it's really for them. You know, like just figure that out. And that could be done in multitudes of ways. Yeah. You know, my best advice is take somebody who has done it and take them out to coffee and just have a real conversation. Like if you're figuring out whether you should do real estate or not, like don't read books, don't go to seminars, don't go to YouTube, because 99% of the time they're trying to sell you something. Yeah. And if they're trying to sell you something, they're not going to talk about their honest experiences. They're only going to talk about the good things. You know, so where the honest things are going to come out is when you sit down with them one-on-one, you know, over lunch, over coffee, and you ask them like, dude, just give me the honest experience, you know, and I try and do my best, right? Like even on our YouTube channel, like I do my best to tell people like the honest thing. That's why like even some of our most popular YouTube videos, like we put out a video, I think it was about a year ago or something, or like 8 months, I don't know, on the negative aspects of the BRRRR strategy.
Yeah.
And I literally just look back at it, and it's got like a 2-to-1 like dislike ratio, which on YouTube is horrible. Like I think it's got
crazy.
like 270 something likes, and it's got 140 something dislikes. And I looked at that, and I have never been more prouder of myself, because if I told people what they wanted to hear, which is the BRRRR strategy is the second coming of our Lord and Savior, then people would have liked it.
Absolutely.
It would have had 400 likes and 0 dislikes. But a lot of times people just don't want to hear the truth, you know? And these are things that, I mean, and I tell people all the time, like, listen, my opinions on the BRRRR strategy, which that video, I don't even know, I think it's got like 20 or 30,000 views, which is not a lot, but, you know, it's got some traction, you know? But it's like, listen, like, like that entire video, that's not even my opinion. Like, that's fact.
Yes.
Like, you guys don't understand. Like, that's not an opinionated video.
Yeah.
That's literally me observing all the people who have done the strategy and just being the messenger.
Yeah.
You know,
That's it. A lot of people I notice want to argue with basic economics, and numbers don't lie. So
exactly. Like, it's foolishness. You know what I mean? I'm like, guys, like, I'm literally just being a messenger. Like, I'm just observing and telling you what I genuinely see. There's nothing in there that's my opinion, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, a lot of people get angry at that. So for the person just starting out, you know, it can be a lot of noise is what I'm trying to say. You know, like all this to say, like for the person starting out, it's a lot of noise. And you know, just try and figure out whether or not this is for you, and meet with somebody one-on-one. And if it is for you, then awesome. Like, get as much information as you possibly can. You know, figure out, and I don't have to say anything. There's things you can do. Like, you can go to your YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. There's books you can get. There's meetups you can go to. There's people you can connect with. The steps are pretty obvious. You know?
For sure. And I like your honesty with that newcomer of saying just, you know, it's not always going to work out the way that you would like it to. And I think that's part of your integrity in your business. So another thing I wanted to talk about is when it comes to that newcomer, because I'm in a phase where I'm starting to coach people on a little bit that I know currently. And it's for 2 reasons, obviously, because, you know, obviously I want to help other people. But what it does is it trains me for who I want to be in the future, too. So I'm getting practice as well. One thing I noticed, however, is what I did to get started was I found people like you and was like, hey, if I can raise capital for this deal or bring a deal that you like, you know, could we somehow partner on it? And I feel like that's a very underrated way to get started in business in general, because it's literally one of the easiest things I ever done. The hardest thing I ever done was did it myself. So, and I think it's maybe, and I don't know what it is, but I think maybe it's an ego thing. How, as a business owner, a CEO, a founder, what tactics do you use in order to keep the ego in check? Because I do feel like as an entrepreneur, that can really get out of hand for some people, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have huge egos for no apparent reason at all.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, there's a lot of those
Air
two.
quotes for the people listening.
Air quotes.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, it's tough, man. I think we live in a day and age where it's like there's nobody in the middle anymore. Like, everybody's just on extremes, you know? Like, I've met so many entrepreneurs who, like, they provide so much value, but they are not verbal. Like, they're not going out there and spreading. But at the same time, there's a lot of kids who, you know, just because they're 22 and own a hoodie, think they're Mark Zuckerberg. You know, like, you know, they're thinking, you know, they join like this multi-level marketing company, like they've got their squad, they've got their crew, and they like go live on Instagram for no apparent reason, and like they have nothing to really share, you know. So it's tough. I mean, like it's really tough. A lot of it is ego. You know, a lot of it is they want to appear successful, and you have this thing called fake it till you make it, which I think is just total BS.
Yeah.
You know, because even just the whole ideology of faking it till you make it, it's like, well, okay, like what happens when you do make it? You still have those habits of faking it, that stay with you.
Yeah.
So nobody's interested in like being better than who they were yesterday. They think who they are now is good enough, and it's like it sucks, right? It's like we live in a world where we reward a lot of poor behavior. It's a lot of positive reinforcement for negative aspects and negative behavior. So I think what people should do, right? Because there are people who have egos. Is there's a common thing that every successful person has. It's not confidence. It's not ego. It's not whatever. But it's more so of just creating value. Like I think if you work at the pace of the value you create, it's key. And people are like, well, how do I create value? Right? Like that's the biggest question I get a lot. And I'm sure people ask you that all the time. It's like, well, how do I create value? Number one, it's not like it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Right? So like what I used to do when I first started is I used to ask everybody I met, like, hey, what's the number one thing that I can help you with? Like what's the number one struggle? Like creating value has nothing to do with like if you give an Eskimo ice, you're not creating value for them.
Yeah.
You're not. If anything, you're causing them more problems. So for but an Eskimo would love a hot cocoa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So figure out what is the hot cocoa to like the Eskimos.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to serve everyone. So my biggest advice for people listening in right now would just be let's just figure out who's around you and figure out how you can be a commodity.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely amazing piece of advice because I believe back when I first met you, you asked me, like, what is one thing that I could do to help your business or you personally or something along those lines. And it was the first time that I literally heard anybody say that, like with the open mind. Because usually people say, oh, I could do this. Can I do this for you? And it's like, oh, yeah, yes or no, or whatever the case may be. But I've never heard somebody, what can I do for you? How can I be of service? Especially at the time, you knew tons about real estate. I didn't know really anything. And when I heard that, that always stuck with me. And I think it catches people off guard because even now, sometimes I say it and people are like, what? Yeah. And it's just crazy that we have all these entrepreneurs, and if everybody who claimed they were an entrepreneur was a real entrepreneur, it would be a lot more people saying this and hearing it. But it just goes to show how few real entrepreneurs we have because nobody's used to that question. And really, I feel like that question of how can I add value is the basis, the foundation on which entrepreneurship is actually built. I mean, if you can't provide value, how do you make money?
Right.
So,
and everybody wants to be like an influencer nowadays.
Yeah.
Like everybody just wants to be an influencer because all they see is, well, I just got to post content. I don't really have to sell a product. I don't have to do this. Well, it's not really that simple.
Yeah.
Like I was in California a couple of weeks ago, and I did a little trip. I was raising money for a very large deal that I'm doing right now. And I was in LA for a couple of days, and I was in San Fran, and I went to Silicon Valley, and there's a guy that I brought a friend of mine with me. He's like my spiritual mentor, but he knows a lot of people. Yeah, like he has friends that like own NBA teams and things like that. But really good guy, right? Just he wanted to introduce me with those people. So I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not gonna say no, whatever. But we stopped by this guy's house, and this dude name is Barry. So shout out to Barry. But Barry does executive coaching for companies in Silicon Valley. Cool. And he's seen like the highest level entrepreneurs. Like he's met CEO of Google, Microsoft, like you name it. Like he's met these guys, and he's done coaching for their staff. And I think I think that day, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, you can't. But anyways, like just I don't know why I said that, but. If I'm not mistaken, right? Like I think that morning he literally just did coaching for Google because they have multiple campuses in San Fran, and I was listening to the guy and I kind of asked him like, why do you think so many successful companies come out of Silicon Valley? Like why do you think so? Like you have Uber, You know, like you have so many different companies that control the world now.
Yeah.
You know, like literally, like whether it's Uber, like, you know, Airbnb, like you have so many companies that have come out of Silicon Valley. And, you know, he is the guy to ask, you know, because he's the dude coaching all these companies who went for zero. Like he literally just told me about a friend of his Korean guy actually, right? Who literally started a company and 6 months later he sold it for $800 million. You know what I mean? So like it's bonkers. And I asked him like, well, why do you think companies out of Silicon Valley do so well? And he's like, well, like I lived in New York, I lived in Chicago, and I lived here in San Fran for the last like 30 something years. But if you go to like the East Coast, if you go to New York and if you go to Chicago, it's always about like who you're with and what do you want, you know? Like it's very transactional. So he was telling me like, even I remember when I was in New York, like our office wouldn't even take a call unless you said you were with like Wells Fargo or you were with Morgan Stanley or you're with, you know, well, not now, but back then, like Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
You know, like, and same thing in the Midwest. Like even in Chicago, like, you know, I was talking to a guy I had lunch with. You know, he's a very good friend of mine, a guy named Dave Diamond. So shout out to Dave Diamond. But he's a phenomenal capital raiser. You know, and I got connected to him through one of my mentors, Joe Vranken, who's the former CEO of Topgolf. So, you know, and I was talking to him, and I had lunch with a guy named Jerry, and Jerry's like the #2 securities attorney in the country. And, you know, we were in downtown Chicago. We were having lunch because, you know, I'm putting together a syndication fund, and, you know, Jerry is the guy to talk to. And, you know, I'm going to hire Jerry to do some of my paperwork. But, you know, Dave said something to me. He's like, well, no offense, but, like, I wouldn't have taken a meeting with you unless Joe, you know, unless Joe made the introduction, you know. And I realized, you know, it just kind of attributed towards, like, in the Midwest and in New York, like, you know, Barry is absolutely right. You know, unless you're with somebody important or you have a deep connection, you know, you're not able to get those meetings. But Barry said something really interesting. But he said, in Silicon Valley, what I learned is it's not about who you're with or who you are. It's all about what's your idea. You know, like what's your idea? Like I don't care what your name is. I don't care who you're with. You could be from Wells Fargo, Bells Fargo. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? But like
your mom's basement.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's just what's your idea? And you know, Silicon Valley and you know, and just in that Bay Area, you know, among the entrepreneurs, they've created such a culture where it's not about who you are, but it's more about the best ideas win. You know, like they've created that culture.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many successful companies coming out, because it's literally an arena where the best ideas win.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, it's all about, like those ideas won't survive unless you have relationships to this guy and that guy and that guy, and unless you're with this person and that person, you know. So I mean, it is what it is. But you know, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and that could be very problematic as well, because I feel personally like what I see in the entrepreneurial space sometimes is that like this guy has made a name for himself and he has an idea. It's probably a bad idea, but because he has a big name, nobody's going to say anything. Yeah. And then everybody kind of jumps on his bandwagon, and then it doesn't work out. And it's 100%. Like just weird, because it's like, instead of, you know, the guy that's living in his mom's basement who actually has a good idea.
Yeah, and he's hustling, he's grinding, he's getting sales, he's building his business, and nobody cares about him. Yeah,
it's crazy. And to talk about what you were saying with everybody kind of wants to be an influencer, this is just a message for my audience. I've even found myself in situations where I look at those people, and because of all the clout they have, you kind of want to mimic them sometimes. But one thing I always try to remember, and you kind of help me do that, is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if, you know, some guy has 100,000 likes. If you were able to make more people happy through transaction, you are the better entrepreneur, even though, you know, he has more clout than you, supposedly.
For sure.
So it's like, this is a message not only for me, but my audience as well. Like, don't try to mimic that. It looks great, but at the end of the day, it could be very different behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of influencers too, like they monetize their audience by, affiliate marketing and things like that. And I'm not saying that's bad. Like I never judge the way people put food on the table.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
I never try and do that. Because at the end of the day, man, we're all just trying to make it,
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, it's, I would tell that influencers, like, listen, man, like, I think you should, you need to create a more sustainable system, because those affiliate checks eventually stop.
Yeah.
Unless you create something sustainable, it's not gonna work, and asking people, hey man, what's the greatest challenge in your business right now? I encourage individuals, to the listeners, like I really feel like you should write this down, to people who are listening in right now on this podcast, but make it a point to focus more on the people than on the product.
Yeah.
Like think about how many businesses have gone to the $1 billion level and they didn't start out like that. Like I think the founders of Instagram never intended for Instagram to be what it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, even you guys know the it's not a software, but like, Slack,
Yeah.
like a lot of companies, like I use Slack,
Yeah.
for our communication amongst our, production team, sales team, whatever. The guys who made Slack actually had Slack be the communication platform for another company they were building. Like people don't know, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Like people don't know that. Like the
Yeah,
guys who
I know
started
that.
Slack and build it, they were trying to start another business.
Wow.
And they literally just created Slack just to talk to each other and make it easier.
Yeah.
And like they didn't realize until years later, until like, hey, this could be our product.
Yeah.
So I always tell like make it about the people.
Yeah.
Don't make it transactional. When I ask people, hey, what's the number one thing I can do for you? Like I'm not expecting anything in return. Just because I like investing in the relationships more than than the actual money, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like one of my biggest wins recently. Well, it's not one of my biggest wins. It's something that just personally makes me happy. But I made a new friend, a guy named Chris. Really cool dude. His name is Chris Lesnar. He's one of the founders and starters of I think it's PWI Digital Marketing. But this guy started this company when he was like 19 years old, and by the time he was 21, and he was a senior, like they were bringing in like 10 million in sales a year.
Jeez.
So I mean, so this he's awesome. You know what I mean? And he's a cool dude. And I just sat down and had coffee with him for like 4 hours, and we got introduced through a mutual friend of ours. And he's done marketing for Red Bull, Weber Grill, for Ralph Lauren. So like some of his clients are like the biggest client. That's Chipotle. Like he just he does marketing for Chipotle.
Yeah.
So like he's got the craziest list of clients, but really cool dude, and he's only 27. And so we recently just sat down and we just literally just talked about like marriage. We talked about what does it mean to be in our 20s, and he's a Christian as well. He's a believer. Yeah. So we talked about what does it mean to be Jesus in the marketplace, and and like struggles that he had or struggles that I had, of just being at our age and producing what we produce, and the challenges that come with it, because there's hardly anybody that talks about stuff like this. But for me, that's such a big win, just because I built a relationship with somebody who is my friend, and I'm able to do things for him, and he's able to help me, and there's a mutual friendship, and it's just a relationship. So we haven't even made money together yet.
Yeah.
But I'm still as happy as I could be, just because I that's a new relationship that I could celebrate.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure like by now our listeners can, well, not see because they can't see if they're only listening, but they know that you're super genuine with all the relationships you have. And I mean, we see you create value for people all the time, like your meetups that you have all the time, like those are no pitch events. And you give so much value, and you don't even, I don't think I've seen you like even pass out an email list or something. Like you just give to them.
Yeah, because we use a computer.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. So, but no, in all seriousness, like that is true. Like I said, I focus more on the people than on the product and the money. And I mean, my relationship with Chris, I celebrate that as much as the relationship I have with just people in my meetup. Who quote unquote can't offer me anything. Like there's this really sweet lady. She's more seasoned in life, as you would say. And like 6 months ago, she tried raising money because she's a nurse. She works as a nurse in the hospital, and she attends my meetup like every week. Like for her, it's like church. Like she just doesn't miss it, you know. And she told me the story where I had one of my best friends, Melvin. He came and I interviewed him in the meetup because not a lot of people know, but Melvin, I started coaching him like June 2018. And he did his first deal June 2019 because we literally took an entire year for me to prep him, to get him ready to do the first deal. And since June 2019 till now, it hasn't even been a full year yet. Like we're in March, like it's only been 9 months. Dude made $330,000 in his real estate business. Like that's literally money he took home and like in his bank account, So I interviewed him, and this lady like at the end of the interview just stands up and she's like, "Hey, I just want to say what these guys are talking about. It's absolutely true. Like I tried raising money from this doctor 6 months ago, and she blew me off. But like literally, like this past week, I started talking to her as a person. I did what Daniel told me to do. I focused more on her as a person than as just capital. And like after like 20 minutes of talking with her, like she was the one that brought up real estate, and she started asking me all these questions, and all I did was just answer them. And by the end of it, like she was asking me for my number and wanting to do deals with me. And she literally said, "Hey, let me know when you've got some business because we got to do business together and things like that." So for me, like I was, if anything, I was more happier about that than like my relationship with anybody else, because it just showed me like, wow, like it's it's working.
Absolutely. And one thing that's always amazed me about you is your willingness to teach. Like you were saying, at this organization that we were both part of, I came in under somebody else. You can argue that I was somebody else's responsibility, but when I saw what you were doing and I started to just kind of sit in and listen to you, you poured into me like I was your responsibility. So the question I have is, what motivates you to continually teach others when you're in your 20s and you could probably just retire if you wanted to right about now?
Yeah, and a lot of people say the word legacy. Like everybody says, "Oh, I want to leave behind a legacy." But we live in a world where we associate legacy with something that you do when you're older. Like for me, like my legacy is how many people were more successful because of me.
Yeah.
And even with our products that we have, and Sam and I are both so aligned in this. But how many people's lives are better because of us? Like even the product we have with paying off people's debt. And even just our real estate product, those are our two flagship products we have in the Kwak brothers. And those two products, the first one is to help people eliminate debt and go from negative to zero. Our second product, which is real estate, is to help people go from 0 to 100. So now that you eliminate debt, let's play offense, right?
Yeah.
Now we played a lot of defense. Now let's play offense and talk about how we can, grow your money instead of eliminate it and go in debt.
Yeah.
It's all our legacy is what we do right now. How many more people are successful because of us, and doing the free meetups and doing the free events I did when I was part of this former organization, like all of it just ties into the same model. Ties into the same mission statement. It ties into the legacy play, and you can create a legacy when you're 12. Like think about Kobe Bryant, who just recently tragically died.
Yeah.
The guy was only 41, 42 years old, but I think you can say he left behind a pretty big legacy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And 42, it's such a young age. You know what I mean? Like this guy hasn't really even was at the apex of what he wanted to do after basketball.
Yeah.
But he left a phenomenal legacy. So I mean, it's something that you can do at any time. And of course, when I was teaching or helping people that quote unquote weren't my responsibility, like I got a lot of flack. Matter of fact, like leaders in this former organization, like they came to me and they tried stopping me. They told me, "Hey, like you can't do this. It goes against our guidelines and regulations." And I kind of just said, "Screw your guidelines." Like this is my legacy. This is what you want. This is the big picture. It's about helping people. Create success in real estate.
Yeah.
So not a lot of people are going to agree with that. My very good friend Bob Goff, who's written 2 New York Times best-selling books, which everybody I believe should read. For me, it's the #1 book you should read in business. His first book is called Love Does, And the second book is called Everybody Always, you know, because it talks about how Jesus says, you know, love everybody always. So, you know, he says all the time, you know, it's like when you try doing heroic things without capes, you know, people start getting mad.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, he's the type of guy where, I mean, he literally started like a school in like the Middle East for women, and like he's done all these phenomenal things in Africa and things like that. But I always tell people, when you're an entrepreneur, you know, because this podcast, you know, is about business ownership and entrepreneurship. I always say, if you focus on being a good person above being a good entrepreneur, the entrepreneur things just happens.
Yeah.
You know, it just happens without you knowing, you know. Now, obviously, you know, as business, like, we have to keep in mind, like, what's our bottom line. You know, we got to figure out how to monetize it. But, you know, I always tell people, if you focus on the value creation and you focus on helping people become more successful, then you'll do all right.
Absolutely.
So we covered so much in this episode, and you dropped so many gems. So what is the number one takeaway that you want someone to walk away from this episode with?
Yeah, so it's tough, you know, because I feel like I get asked that a lot, you know, like, what's the number one thing? You know, and I get asked that by a lot of people, and people ask that too. You know, they're like, what is the number one thing? You know, and I used to ask that question all the time, you know. But it's super tough because everybody is in such different scenarios. There's people where I would tell, hey, you need to, like, slow down. You know, like, you're not Mark Zuckerberg. You know, like, you need to, like, just stop posting on Instagram and actually start creating something.
Yeah.
But there's other people where it's just like, you need to pick it up. Like, you need to like, come on now. Like, you know what I mean? Start working. And then there's other people who are like, dude, you're killing it. You got to start advertising yourself more. Like, you got to start marketing yourself more. You know, create an Instagram. You know, so for all those people, number one thing I'd say is, you know, surround yourself with people who will be honest with you. Surround yourself with people who are also killing it. You know, it's a lot like, you know, you trying to have a phenomenal marriage and all your friends are divorced. You know, like, that's one of the things that, you know, my wife Lisa and I had to work on, is surrounding ourselves with people who've had successful marriages. You know, so we've surrounded ourselves with, you know, like I already mentioned it before, but even, you know, Joe and Patty Rankin. You know, Joe's a phenomenal, successful guy. Like, he's built billion-dollar businesses, you know, like Topgolf and, you know, what he's working on now. And, you know, the challenges in their marriage are stuff that Lisa and I may potentially face, you know, because of who I am and because of who she is. Yeah. You know, so we've made it a really good point. You know, Lisa and I both have been very intentional about surrounding ourselves with, you know, couples who have been married for 20+ years, who love the Lord, who have a good marriage, you know, not in the matter like they don't fight or ever, but in a matter of they know how to address conflict. Yeah. You know, they know the best way to communicate with each other. So it's the same thing in business. You know, success, you know, leaves clues, you know. Surround yourself with people who have killed it. Surround yourself with people who are 10, 15, 20 years older than you are. Yeah. You know, and I think I spend more time with people in their 40s, 50s, 60s than I do in their 20s. You know, so that's very important.
Absolutely. And I believe that you're a person who is a giver, and in many different ways as well. You know, not just from a monetary sense, but from a relationship standpoint. You know, like, you don't mind spending hours talking to somebody who isn't, you know, a multi-million-dollar investor. Sure. And you've proven that. And you're very close with your church, and we just have so many aligned beliefs. But you're on the Abundant Culture podcast, so we always have to ask our guests this question, and this question is, out of all the ways that you spread abundance, whether that's giving money, whether it's giving time, whether it's serving people, whatever it is, in your personal or business life, how do you like to spread abundance?
Yeah, so, you know, obviously abundance, you know, true abundance is found in love. You know, I mean, for all of us as believers, you know, we serve a God that is love. You know, Bible talks about that in 1 John. It says God is love. You know, so for me, you know, true abundance coming from love, it's exactly what it is. You know, it's weird. You know what I mean? Just because, like, I'm not intentional. Like, I don't sit in my room and talk about how do I spread abundance. You know, like, I don't think about that. It just happens. Yeah. You know, and because I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and You know, because I do, I have this thing inside me called the Holy Spirit, and you know, sometimes the Holy Spirit goes, hey, like you need to do that and you need to do this.
Yeah.
People don't realize that like Jesus was interested in helping everybody. You know, like in John 5, you know, there's a story, you know, where there's a man who's been invalid for 38 years, you know, near the pool of Bethsaida. And, you know, I was reading that passage the other day, and it occurred to me that Jesus most likely had to walk over other people who were sick to get to that guy, you know?
Wow.
Whereas the disciples would have like, Jesus, look at all these sick people. Like, we got to heal all of them. You know, like if you had like your modern day social justice warrior, like they'd probably be writing nasty articles about Jesus. He's like, oh, like Jesus, you know, he had hundreds of people in the pool and he only healed one person. He has a success rate of 1%. You know what I mean? like that's how people think. You know what I mean? But Jesus wasn't interested in helping everybody.
Yeah.
You know, he was just interested in doing what the Father was telling him to do, and only that.
Yeah.
So he literally walked over other sick people to heal this one guy. And he probably walked over other sick people on his way out, you know? Like, so he healed that one dude, you know? So for him, that's what the Father told him to do, so that's what he did.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, you know, if you, like I remember I was talking to this one guy he's like a multi-millionaire. He owns he lives in Southern California, and another Korean dude. You know, has a...
Man, Koreans are taking over the world, man.
No, man, we're really not. We're dying of the coronavirus. Oh, crap, I said the word. But this guy, like, he just does so well for himself. And he said, like, man, I remember, like, I was your age, Daniel, and we were eating food. We were in Koreatown in L.A. And he's like, I remember I was your age, Daniel. Like, I was in my late 20s, and I asked the Lord, like, hey, God, can you make me a millionaire? And God says, like, no, I love you too much, you know? And just a lot of times, you know, God obviously is wise above all things. And, you know, a lot of times helping somebody become a millionaire is the worst thing you could possibly do for him.
Yeah.
You know? So for me, like, I'm not interested in helping everybody. But I am interested in helping the right people, you know? Which is why, like, I've kind of dialed down. There's a lot of people, for both Sam and I, you know, like there's a lot of people who try and get our attention.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like YouTube comments, Facebook comments, or Instagram, or you know, whatever it may be, especially when we go out and we do speaking gigs. You know, a lot of people try and grab our attention, and, you know, I just have to always remind myself that, you know, helping them, you know, giving them advice, it doesn't mean helping them on their business. It might be something else, you know.
Yeah.
It might
definitely.
it might be just telling them, like, hey man, you should probably just hold off, and you're not there yet, you're not ready. Whatever it may be. So how do you spread true abundance? I don't know. You know, like, I don't want to be the guy here to be like, oh, well, you got to believe in Jesus or you're going to hell. You know, like, I don't want to be that guy, but just that's how I personally do it.
Yeah. And I love it.
And before we wrap up with the final question, I just wanted to point at what you just said about not helping everybody. And you also said that people feel entitled, and that's like definitely a thing right now. And for all of our listeners listening, like, you know, everybody isn't meant to be an entrepreneur. Everybody isn't meant to be a business owner, a real estate investor, or have millions of dollars because, I mean, I'm sure you know this too, like, the more business you have is so much more stressful. So you have to be able to deal with that and deal with it correctly for you to have that impact on people within the business and outside of it.
Yeah. But bringing everything that was said here to a close, you're an awesome person in business, outside of business. I love the Kwak Brothers brand because it helped make me who I am today personally. Nice. So if somebody has a podcast like I do and they want to interview you, or they want to be coached by you, or whatever the case may be, maybe they want to work for free, hint, hit.
Yeah.
He said that in the beginning.
But to copy papers, not to negotiate deals.
Right. Not yet.
Regardless of what they are trying to do, how does somebody get into contact with you?
Yeah, so we got actually a lot of really cool things coming up, you know. So I'm super excited. So we're actually putting together, I think it just finished recently, but, you know, we've been working with developers. I've been pouring tens of thousands of dollars of my own money into a software that actually is going to help real estate investors learn. And it's going to be for free, you know? So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why people can reach out. We're actually starting our own brokerage. So we're starting a Kwak Brothers brokerage. So there's this guy that I really enjoy. His name is Joseph Lozano. He's a broker, and he's like one of the most ethical guys I've met, and I've seen him in like, tight spots, and he's always done the right thing for people. So, we're partnering with him to start our own brokerage. But if people want to reach out, I mean, they can always email us at info@thekwakbrothers.com. It's info at the THEKWAK and then brothers.com. They're always welcome to email us with any questions or whatever they want to do. That's how they can reach out to me.
Awesome. It was great having you on the Abundant Culture podcast, even though we're using your studio.
Yep, this is awesome.
Yeah, man, I love it.
We really, really appreciate it. And we'll love to do another episode with you maybe one day in the future.
For sure.
Because it's always great having somebody like you on who's a believer, entrepreneur, and we just feel like that's just a great combination. So thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.